All right, I'd like to call to order the May regular board meeting for the Ramsey-Washington Metro Watershed District. We're going to seek approval of agenda, but I have a quick question for Lauren before I make a motion on the agenda. Are we allowed to move an item until the fifth board member arrives, or do we have to actually put it into a specific location?
I think you could probably, is it something on the consent agenda?
It is in the regulatory program, so no.
Okay.
So Val asked to be here for the
So-
Madness Rates Affordable Housing presentation.
I think we, I don't know, Tina, do you have an opinion on?
I can just move it to later when we're pretty certain that Val's gonna be here.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm,
Yeah, like maybe make it number
yeah, we
10.
could do it under even presentations,
Oh.
or just move the regulatory
move it
program.
after- I think, yeah,
after.
okay. So I'd like to seek approval of the agenda with item 5B moved to after the board discussion, so it'd be 9B. If I have a motion.
I will make a motion that we approve the agenda with that change.
Second.
So all vote for the approval of the agenda, say aye. Aye. Agenda is approved. Oh, any nays? All right, it's approved. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone wants to move from the consent agenda? All good. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll motion that we approve the consent agenda.
A second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, consent agenda is approved. With that, we usually have discussion. If there's any discussion on these items.
I have an item.
Yeah, go for it.
The change order for the County Road C project. Actually, our two change orders, one's a monetary and the other is kind of a administrative change. And I'm just curious, the arrangement had been that the county reimburses for the project. Are they able to reimburse for that financial part?
Yes, I believe that 1080 was included in that, and that has been sent to the county as of last week.
Okay.
Yes.
It's not
Fresh,
not
have
a
that in
big
here. Yeah.
amount, but yet thought it would be worth asking. If
Yes.
that'd be included.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And so follow up on that same change order, just for financial implications, is it the change order will increase or will decrease the contract price?
Increase.
It's just a typo.
Oh, did it say decrease?
Yeah.
Good catch. Good catch.
So I have several questions on D1, the Maplewood project on Prosperity Road. Just a general question. Who's going to be responsible for the maintenance on that project of the Green Road?
Yeah, the city owns the project, so the city of Maplewood is ultimately responsible. If they are able to get residents for those curb cut rain gardens to sign, agreements, we can direct our future inspection reports directly to those homeowners. Otherwise, the default is city.
Would they be eligible for maintenance grants?
So typically we have not let permit sites, only kind of under certain conditions, but we could talk about.
If it is actually being maintained. by
Yeah,
the homeowner.
yeah.
Yeah,
If it's by the homeowner, yes, yeah.
And then certainly the large underground system will be the responsibility of the city to clean out and inspect.
Perfect, thanks. Next question is on E1, the Pioneer Park stormwater enhancement. Just a question, I was just looking at the schematic for the stormwater ponds. Is there will the city consider an alternative to that reseeding with residential turf grass in that area?
It's possible. We can ask them.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean.
Yeah, because they are doing some natives elsewhere, so. Yeah,
Just,
they've already gone out for bid, but
Yeah, they have, because they're getting close to starting or they're. starting
yeah,
this week.
soon. Okay,
if the whole project is about reducing use of water and then.
yeah,
why not
yeah.
do something there, so.
Any other comments on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we will close that portion and move on to visitor comments. Are there any visitors online or seeking to make comment, or are you guys here for another action item? You're all here for another action item, all right? I don't see anyone online. So we'll turn it over to the regulatory program.
So the one permit that was not included on consent agenda this evening is the Oakdale Street Reconstruction Project. It's near east of Tanner's Lake. There is a variance request enclosed with this permit request, so it's not included on consent. But, you know, it's a fairly standard street reconstruction project, utility replacement, curb and gutter, that kind of thing. They are proposing a filtration bench adjacent to a wetland that's currently being used as a stormwater basin. It's actually a wetland that we have excavated in the past. I don't know, ABI pond rings a bell, but that's what we refer to it as here in the district. So for water quality, they're wanting to construct a filtration bench adjacent to that wetland so that when the water rises, it'll spill over into that bench. They are proposing to partially meet volume reduction credits with that bench and then proposing to defer the remainder of the volume requirement because they already know they're reconstructing a street nearby next year in 26. And they'd like to design and construct more regional treatment that would take care of the 26 projects and the remainder of the 25. So because that stormwater basin was historical wetland, it is still jurisdictional, so there's a no loss application that has been submitted for processing. No permanent impacts to the wetland are proposed, but the variance that's included tonight is disturbance to the wetland buffer. So there would be temporary disturbance for access and grading, but also if you consider the bench, that could be considered a permanent impact.
What are they proposing to replant the bench with, or is it just?
It's iron and hand sand, so nothing. But yeah, they'll probably have to do weed management long-term for O&M.
But I saw a seeding plan for some portion of the project. Maybe it was.
Yeah, there's slopes that they would have to reseed and restore, part of those temporary impacts for the wetland buffer that they're asking for that variance for. So yeah, there will be some restoration, but the bench itself would be essentially iron and hand sand.
In the figure, I don't remember, it's on page 1, no, that's another, but I didn't see that this wetland was identified as part of the district's management classification system.
Yeah,
So I'm a little curious because they talk about the buffer being a 37.5 foot, which
Yep.
would be an A classification, and I'm not, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
yeah, so I had to dig back into old WACA permits that we ourselves pulled back when this excavation took place. And so part of this pond is considered mitigation for that original impact. I think it was in maybe 2005. So any mitigation wetlands are automatically the highest classification in terms of buffer. So physically, ecologically, maybe not the highest class, but gets that protection because there's mitigation associated with it.
So is it in the management classification system?
No.
It
It was
ignored or-
identified, yeah, as a sediment pond, because that's really how it functions.
Sure.
And I think it took the delineation for the Gold Line project for us really to dive into the jurisdiction of it, because it was done before any of us were involved in that area. So yeah, we had to look at aerial photography and look at those old permits to determine that. But
A couple more questions. Thinking about the iron enhanced filter system, I know there are a few of them around the district. Variance is really about a buffer. But they also have a temporal issue in terms of the volume control, which is not really included as a variance, but I'm just curious what the typical infiltration or response and iron enhanced filter is going to be from a volume control standpoint.
yeah, they had to submit and quantify what the volume achieved, below the outlet. So Brandon did review that closely. We assign 80% credit for volume for an enhanced filtration when compared to infiltration. So it has a reduced percent credit because of the drain tile, but yeah, they had to demonstrate through their modeling the actual storage and drawdown that was associated with that bench. And then in response to the deferment of the volume, that is part of our alternative compliance sequencing. So it wouldn't technically, it would be a variance unless they fail to provide it within the 2 years that they are required to. So,
Right, and it sounds like they want to do that next year.
yeah,
They're talking about a regional pond, I assume a pond,
yeah.
a regional treatment system. Have they identified, I guess, a
Very
conversation? Yeah, so, all right. I feel a little more comfortable if they
yeah.
specifically said, yeah, here's where it's going, but it's not gonna happen until we do these three approved.
Yep. And that's true for, another, like a Woodbury project we approved recently, or you approved recently, where it was a deferred. So they essentially identify a footprint, a location that they're looking at, and they've done some preliminary feasibility for, but the actual design will need to be submitted for review so that they can actually get those credits that they're hoping for to meet our requirements. So yeah, we'll have to review that as a separate item. I anticipate that design will be done when they apply for their 2026 street projects. That's the plan.
Yeah, but at that point, this would have already been approved and probably constructed.
Yeah, there's a clause in our rules that if they fail to provide that treatment within 2 years application date, I think it is, that they are required to pay into the stormwater impact fund. And we also require them to meet on-site rate control at all times. So the project as designed meets our rate control, so there's not like a concern about flooding as a result of this project. But yeah, so there is a provision if that deadline is not met.
That was the next question, is whether or not if they had a big event in
Yeah.
this area, is there a chance for flooding? It's probably not a big concern, at least.
Yeah.
Did they submit any type of phasing plan since this is a surface sand bench and it's being seeded above? Like, how are they activating it? I'm assuming they're not doing that until it's been vegetated so that they don't get washout into the sand filter bench.
Yeah, we'll be inspecting for, our standard erosion and sediment control. Yeah, hopefully we'll have to work with the contractor to see how they sort of keep it offline or bypassed until they can get that sand down in the drain tiling. So I haven't heard, I don't believe that they're planning to dewater, but if they do, they'll have to come through us for that review. But yeah. We have permitted a number of these in the past. They're becoming more and more popular, especially with like MnDOT projects. So It's certainly something that we're used to seeing, but yeah, I guess every site's different, so we'll see
Mhm.
during construction.
Any other questions or comments on the Oakdale application?
I assume there aren't any volume banking credits that they could tap.
You know, I think Oakdale does have or will have some banked volume from excess treatment provided on the Gold Line. Metro Transit's actually selling some or giving excess volume that they're constructing, so they don't have to maintain out those BMPs long term. But that hasn't officially been signed off yet, but yeah, they opted to just use the deferment because they think they can get there with their next year's projects.
You know, the timing, it's right against the gold line, and I know staff has had a lot of activity with gold line, and I don't remember the plans and specs specifically. But I'm just, don't any concerns with what we've resulted from the gold line and now this project in that localized area, it doesn't really matter.
No, they're substantially complete with Gold Line. Gold Line is open and running, so I don't think that there would be any conflicts there.
So do we need a motion on this one? Yeah, so I'd be looking for a motion on either approval or
One more
action. Yeah,
question.
go for it.
Before we accept a motion and on the topic of banking, because it sounds like there isn't a plan to replace the buffer in any way. There is the deferment for the volume control, which will happen hopefully next year. But as you already mentioned, Nicole, you know, for practical purposes, this is a permanent impact to the buffer from a habitat and so forth. It certainly will be of great benefit from a treatment downstream up to Shadow Creek Lake. So forth. Is there a way that at this point we could push them toward that banking options?
Oh, in lieu of the bench at all?
Well, no, I'm just trying to get something in return for the loss of this buffer.
So replace. We don't, yeah, so we would only bank volume reduction credits. We don't bank like buffer.
Yeah.
And really, to be impactful to the resource, you can't, if it's gonna be a bench right next to it,
Right.
you know, it's hard to have a,
And they really are, they really are hemmed in. They don't really have a lot of opportunities to, they could, you know, expand the buffer, you know, on a certain side or anything like that. So,
Buffers are there for water quality, and this is a water
Mhm.
quality improvement, so it's acting
Yeah.
as a buffer in a way.
yeah, outside of the loss of whatever vegetation is up there
Yeah.
currently in that section, I don't think it's necessarily a water quality or erosion concern.
Right.
But yeah, it certainly is a change. And I don't know, Erin, if you know, like, we're still looking at something in this area. What?
Yes, we have that on a flood risk reduction list.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
potentially
in this
working
area.
Yep. With the adjacent church, they own a lot of that empty space
to the
that you see.
northeast. Yeah.
Yeah, so the actual city-owned parcel around that pond is quite small. A lot of that is the church, so, I don't believe they have permission to, you know, enhance anything other than what they own. But potentially we'd be looking at it for,
Yep, it's on the list.
we know the pond is undersized for its drainage area, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So do we have a motion on on the application for the Oakdale 2025 SIP.
Second?
Is this for approval? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes. So we'll move to the regulatory monthly memorandum.
Yeah, I have a list of this month's violations, some meetings of interest and maybe not. A couple single lot residential permits approved just for erosion control. They're actually part of a larger common plan of development that we have a permit for already. So those are new builds. And then some training updates for Kendra and Mary. Project updates. You've probably noticed if you've driven in the area, but Highway 61 is under construction. So that's a big project that we're inspecting for. And then we also highlighted the start of St. Paul's Fish Hatchery Trail project down by Little Pig's Eye Lake that we're getting to inspect as well.
It's a very busy construction season in that area.
Yeah, it really is. Yep, there's another trail that almost like kind of connects to it to the west, the Samuel H. Morgan Trail. But I also wanted to mention that I expect to be later this summer on maternity leave. So I have a couple more board meetings that I'll be presenting permits for, and then I will probably be out starting late July.
Yeah,
Yeah.
big news.
Yeah, so I've been working kind of all winter and spring to cross train Kendra on wetland and WACA stuff. And then Mary on permit. She'll be presenting permits to you. We also have obviously the assistance of BAR for permit, rule clarification, interpretation, permit review, like always.
Or we'll miss you, but we
Yeah.
know we have competent staff behind you.
Yes,
So
I'm fully confident.
And I noticed that Kendra was attending some of those.
Yeah.
That's the co-op.
Yeah.
Getting trained up.
That makes sense.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Your Baling Creek daylighting maintenance discussion.
Yeah.
So, that's moving forward.
Yeah, we haven't received a permit application yet. This discussion was mostly about O&M of the proposed changes and construction of that system. And so St. Paul Parks was also involved in that call, as well as the agency that's representing the development group for that project. So yeah, as far as we know, it's still moving forward. We weren't really discussing anything related to the stormwater design. It was just really like, if they build all these pieces and parts that are all interacting, who's gonna be inspecting and maintaining?
Yeah, so we should see a more formal ask in June, potentially a permit. I think they said June, but probably after June.
Yeah, so that formal ask on what they would like the district to participate in with regard to that project, as far as like O&M, that would come to the board separate from a permit request.
Thank you. All right, moving on, we will go to the stewardship grant program.
Yes, so we had, 5 applications on the consent agenda. Yeah, a number of staff approval grants have come in. We did receive, so I think we're up to our second enhanced street sweeping grant. We have received applications, or actually received an application from City of St. Paul, and then we're expecting to receive one from White landfall. So hopefully you'll see those next month.
A question on the street sweeping application we did receive. Is there any provision where they would be collecting data?
Yes, so, yep, so we asked for all the material weights collected, and and they have to submit that before we send them their reimbursement check.
So that's kind of become standard.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I thought so. Thanks.
Yep,
That
If I
will be
remember
good.
correctly, Oakdale is the one that provided that information.
yes, Oakdale, yeah, Woodbury always sends very detailed reports, yeah.
Any other questions or comments on the stewardship grant program?
Glad to see the application. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep,
A little slow earlier this year.
yeah, it seems to start that way and then they get going. And then a number of them are wrapping up, you know, things that were approved last year, so.
Still no art, though.
Arts. No, can't remember if we had any last year, but, yeah, it's on the website and it's just, I don't know. Yeah. Keep pushing it.
All right, we'll,
Just a question on the art, if I'm, did we used to have an artist in residence?
We never have, Cap Region did,
Okay, and then, in my South Washington.
yes,
Mhm, okay.
yeah, yeah.
Do you know if there's ever been a discussion about that here?
I knew you were gonna ask that. I don't know, I'll have to ask Tina. You know, I'm sure we did talk about it when Cap Region, because they had theirs a number of years ago. Yeah, I'll ask him.
Thanks.
all right. Any other comments or questions on stewardship grant program? All right, we have one action item tonight then. We are reviewing the 2024 district annual financial audit.
Yeah, so nothing, I mean, it was a good, you know, a good year for the audit, no findings. Clean bill of health, I guess you could say.
We do those annually, correct?
Correct.
Mhm.
Yep, yep, so Shelley fronts those and then brings in, you know, definitely Tina and other staff as needed.
Yeah, look good.
Yeah, nothing jumped out to me. So leaving it for other managers to, if they had any questions or anything they wanted to discuss that was in the audit.
Feel free to reach out to Tina too if you have more questions as we go through it, but it is here for your information. It has been submitted and.
Mhm.
Yeah, so.
So if there's no other discussion, can I get a motion to accept the 2024 annual audit report?
I will offer a motion to accept it.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that action item passes. Moving on to the attorney report.
Hi, everybody. Good to be with you again. It's been a few months and there's a few new faces. So I'm Lauren. I've mostly just been reviewing some contract documents for the few projects that went out to bid recently, the Cochrane Recovery Project, Maplewood, Toyota, and Roosevelt Homes. And still kind of touching base, keeping track of the Fish Creek project, which I was hoping would be all wrapped up by the time I came back from leave, but here we are. So we'll keep an eye on it. But nice to see you all. It's good to be back.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, board discussion topics. I'll bring one forward, just the fact that there was a CAC meeting that both Stephanie and I attended, where they went through kind of the same questioning as we did regarding our planning around the new management plan that Bar and the staff here have been working on. I thought it was a really great discussion. They are a very well-informed group, came up with a lot of the same questions and answers as us. I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Stephanie, or what your group was talking about?
Yeah, So it's always impressive to see to see the wealth of experience that the CAC brings, and especially in their insight from both professional and just kind of with experience. And so lots of wonderful examples coming from people who work in different parts of the city or the metro area. So just looking forward to what the overall report looks like.
Welcome, Val. We are on board discussion topics. I don't know. Board discussion topics. We were just discussing the CAC meeting last month where they went through kind of the same survey that we did for the management program or management plan that the bar and staff are putting together. So are there any other discussion topics that people had for this evening? All right, and Val, you're also right on time because we moved the Vadnais Heights Affordable Housing Project to item 9B, which we will start now, and I'll turn the meeting over to you at this point.
Thank you, sir. Y'all are much more efficient with me not here. I'll keep that in mind.
I wasn't gonna say.
After you, and we're moving to the permit programs.
Yeah.
After you,
Cool.
Nicole.
Yeah, so I'll just kick this off. I just want to point out, we do have representatives here on behalf of the developer, Real Estate Equities, their consultant, Braun Intertech, and City of Vadnais Heights as well. So they're here to listen in on this discussion. I wanted to bring this project forward just to let you know that this prospective developer has been engaging with our staff and members of the WACA technical evaluation panel. So we have been over the last few months now actually reviewing some iterations of some sequencing that was submitted for this project, specifically avoidance and minimization. They're hoping to, we'll go into or have Blaine present the project in a little bit. But I just wanted to let you know they're looking at this undeveloped parcel, and in order for their preferred alternative to be constructed, it would necessitate a rather large wetland impact, permanent wetland impact. So we wanted to bring this forth just to get your reaction, comments, concerns. There's no board action being requested tonight. The actual application that has been submitted is just for sequencing. So it's just that analysis of the avoidance and minimization. Approval of that would basically acknowledge that they've sufficiently answered questions that the TEP has. It doesn't approve any impacts. It doesn't approve the project. This is sort of a step before a replacement plan, at which time the board would review that replacement plan in full. They could either approve or deny the wetland impacts. If they approve, they would also be, you'd also be specifying what you'd like to see for mitigation. So we just wanted to get this in front of you earlier before you see that replacement plan on a future board agenda, followed by eventually a grading permit application as well, if things keep progressing forward. So I can share my screen and we can start presentation. You can sit up here or whatever's comfortable.
Yeah,
for
whatever you want. Yeah.
Is why I'm also signed in here. Sorry, everybody. There we go. Okay, just tell me when you want me to advance.
All right,
Slide.
thanks, Nicole. My name is Blaine Barker with Real Estate Equities. Also have Travis Fristed from Braun Intertech here, and Nolan Wall from the City of Adams Heights. We've engaged Braun to be our consultant on the sequencing plan, the EAW, and the forthcoming replacement plan. And then we will be going through the city entitlement process with Adams Heights later this summer, kind of dual tracking with the replacement plan. So I asked Nolan to come here just to hear the watershed board's thoughts on the project, so that he's familiar with your comments and everything. So again, thanks for allowing me to present to you all and talking through this project today. Real Estate Equities is based in St. Paul. We strictly own and manage apartment buildings, primarily affordable apartments. We own about 4,500 apartments throughout the Twin Cities, Rochester, and some in Arizona, but predominantly here in the Twin Cities metro. And we own or we manage everything we own. So we're the developer, owner, and manager. So we typically, the minimum we'll own a property for is 15 years, but we often own it for much longer. We have some properties we've owned since the 80s. So, we are invested in the communities in which we develop long-term. Nicole, you can, next one, thank you. And so here are just some examples of recent developments we've done to kind of show what we build. These are all affordable housing developments targeted at people who make 60% or less of the area median income for the 7 county metro area determined by HUD. So we built 204 units in Eagan, 114 in St. Louis Park, 160 in Rosemont. Then we actually just broke ground on 126 units in Woodbury. So I included those just so you can see the finished product of what we propose. Nicole. And then this next slide are some of the same properties, just showing the interior. We like to highlight these because affordable housing or workforce housing can mean a lot of different things to different people. And what we really like to stress is we build it to a market rate standard. There's nothing different about the product itself. It's just that it's income and rent restricted. So when you go to one of our properties, whether from the exterior or interior, you shouldn't know that it's a workforce housing development. We really take pride in developing a high quality product. So that's granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, LVP flooring, in-unit washer dryer, everything you'd expect to see in a traditional market rate apartment. We have club rooms, fitness centers, playgrounds, little dog runs. The only bell and whistle we don't have expansive roof decks that maybe some properties have or pools, but otherwise we include everything that you typically see in an apartment building. And so we are developing, or we are proposing to develop 180 unit workforce housing development in Vadnais Heights on the southeast corner of 694. And sorry, I should have included a bigger zoom out, but it's part of a larger parcel where we're developing the western half. We are impacting slightly over an acre, or proposing to impact over an acre of wetland. And then we're proposing to do some on-site mitigation on the eastern side of the site, which is not shown on the screen, but it'd be east of here. And then also purchasing credits to get to the remainder of the 2-to-1 mitigation. As Nicole mentioned, we've only done the sequencing. We haven't done a full replacement plan. We wanted to have this early discussion with you on the sequencing and proposal before we get too far ahead on everything. So we're proposing, it's a 6-story building. It'd be 1 level of at-grade parking due to the water table and some site constraints. We can't go underground. So at-grade parking underneath the footprint of the building, 5 levels of housing above that. And then we also have some surface stalls as well. And we're getting to about a 1.8 stalls per unit. This is slightly below the city's requirement of 2 stalls per unit. We'll be asking a variance from them just so that we can try to minimize the proposed impact a little bit. And then we've also seen in the properties we own and manage throughout the metro that 1.8 stalls per unit is kind of a sweet spot for us of what's necessary for parking. Also do want to point out that our unit mix is a little different than a traditional market rate development. We're more heavily weighted in the 2 and 3 bedroom units. We really build these developments for families. That's the main target for this. So figured I'd mention that. And here's a rendering of the proposed development from 694. And this is a little misleading because you only see four levels here. And those are actually levels 3 through 6. So level 2 is being obscured by the trees. You can kind of see it. And then level 1 is actually below the elevation of the highway because the site's kind of in a depression from the highway. So I wanted to mention that. I know that's caused some confusion when we've shown this, but it is a 6-story building, 5 levels of housing, then the one level of garage. And this is, just a high level rendering. Again, we haven't gone through the approval process with the city of Vadnais Heights. This is a first cut, just showing of what we envisioned for the development. And then these are just more examples of some of the amenities and unit finishes that we include in our developments. Again, we always have a fitness center, club room, enclosed parking, playground and dog run on the site. And then also a outdoor patio with a grill and some tables. And again, the unit stainless steel appliances, in-unit laundry, granite countertops, LVP flooring. We also do include elements of sustainable design. So we pursue Energy Star certification and then also follow the Minnesota overlay to Enterprise Green Communities. So some of the elements, so Energy Star appliances, we often put EV car charging stations, which kind of depends on the amount of parking stalls, but here we'd estimate about 30 level 2 EV car charging stations, high efficiency mechanical, electrical and plumbing, continuous exterior installation on the frame of the building, solar ready roof, which we typically do put a solar panels on the roof as well. And then I alluded to affordable housing, which can mean many things to different people. So I wanted to be more specific here and let you all know what that is. So most of the units will be at the 60% AMI. Again, that's these rent and income limits apply to the whole 7-county metro. They're not area specific or city specific. So we're targeting households who make anywhere from $55,000 to $92,000. And then the rent, since we have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, will range from $1,400 to about $1,930. And then to a comparison, market rents can range, but I put that to kind of show where our rents compare to what would typically be available in the market. So we are several $100s below, especially on the larger bedroom types. And I mentioned earlier that we primarily build larger units, 2 and 3 bedroom units. That's where we see the most demand. Those are the most underserved households for the larger units. So we tend to focus on those. And so we've been looking at developing a workforce housing development in Vadnais Heights for several years now. We just haven't found a site that's suitable or haven't found a willing landowner to sell. But I wanted to highlight some statistics. So Met Council states that roughly 2/3 of people renting in Vadnais Heights are housing cost burdened, showing a need in the city. HUD also designates this area as a qualified census tract, meaning that more than half of the people living in that census tract make less than 60% area median income, which is the group we're targeting and trying to provide this housing for. And then the city also engaged Stantec to do a housing study, I believe last year, and they found that more people commuted to Vadnais Heights to work instead of commuting out of Vadnais Heights, which showed that there's jobs in Vadnais Heights, but there's maybe not enough housing that people working in Vadnais Heights can live in the community where they work. So these are several of the reasons why we've been targeting Vadnais Heights for one of our developments. And then this specific site, now, one of the questions we've gotten is, well, why do you want to impact this wetland? Why can't you go somewhere else? And the short answer is we've tried. We've made several offers to other landowners throughout Vadnais Heights and locations we thought were good fits for workforce housing. And one had environmental contamination, and then we've had several landowners just say they're not willing to sell. So we came across this site. We're able to make an arrangement with the current landowner. We do not own the property. We have a contract to purchase it. So that's one of the reasons is we've been trying, and this is the first one we've had to hit. And then the second is the qualified census tract also allows for additional federal resources to help subsidize the affordability and make the development financially feasible. And there's only a portion of Vadnais Heights that's in this qualified census tract. So there's some of the reasons why we've and our sequencing application goes into a little more detail on that, but wanted to highlight kind of why we're pursuing this development at this site. So that's all I have for now. Again, we have Travis here to talk about specifics on the sequencing plan and answer any questions on the EAW or forthcoming replacement plan. But really just want to thank you all for allowing me to present to you all and for considering development, and welcome any feedback you have or questions. So thank you.
Yeah, so I included a portion of the sequencing application in the board packet. I didn't include all of it. It was, we were frankly worried about the size of the board packet going out for distribution. So there's certainly more information than what you see in front of you, but I did include a subset of that application, which is kind of summarizes the avoidance minimization and the alternative sites that were considered. I also included the most recent comments that the TEP had. I have since received a response to those comments and they're under review. So, a notice of decision by staff, by me, would be forthcoming, in the next couple weeks or so. And again, that's just the sequencing. It doesn't approve any impacts to take place. So it doesn't approve any mitigation or anything like that. So it's just an acknowledgement that we don't have any additional questions about their analysis. So, and I apologize, I didn't include it in the packet. Val brought this to my attention when we were referencing specific wetland names. I didn't have a figure, so I printed off that figure that includes the approved wetland delineation with labels. Questions, just want to visualize that. But yeah, we can open it up again. There's no board action being requested. Initial thoughts, comments, questions, concerns that we could either add to approval conditions of the current application, or we could have the applicant potentially address in a future replacement plan. So.
Kick us off, Mark.
Sure.
You made eye contact, that's the problem.
And just for disclosure purposes, we're not voting. I know Travis, he was one of our student interns, I don't know, 20 years ago, a while ago. Yeah. So the figure was not included in the packet. So there wasn't much wetland information provided. And now that I see the figure, can somebody say a little bit about which of these wetlands would likely be proposed to be impacted by the preferred?
Is there a way to, recall with the?
Yeah. I can pull something up here. I agonized over what to include in that packet, but I always choose wrong.
Maps. No, it's
Yeah,
fine.
maps would be great. Hard to respond or think about something about knowing its place.
Well, just to add, as you're pulling something up, you
Yeah.
know, I understand the outcome, what's kind of shot for. I think this mapping illustrates to me, it's a much larger impact in that overall wetland space than I was anticipating, just quite honestly, when I read the WP. So you have conflicting priorities. We got to find affordable housing. I think it's really admirable. But at this point, a wetland A is one of our best wetlands that we have. And so as we sit back and think, I just need additional.
Just wanna clarify, it's just called wetland A.
Oh,
in the
forgive me.
drainage.
It's not, I thank you. That would, I didn't realize that. When I saw A, I assumed classification, but it's a wetland nevertheless. I'm trying to figure out what other design alternatives in terms of just configurations of buildings, parking, et cetera, that y'all consider. And I figured the map would be a good way to get through it.
Yeah, and the narrative discussion of that was included in your board packet, but I can go to any layout any figure that's referenced that you'd like to.
Okay.
I'm trying to get around all these toolbars that are making it difficult to.
The descriptions were good. They were challenging to actually mentally do. And I drive out this spot the whole time and I was like, oh, I don't know where this is, how this is gonna coordinate.
There's also a delay, so I apologize. Okay. This figure is showing the preferred alternative. So Blaine had the sort of zoomed in figure with this building orientation here, but this is where it would, be on the greater site. They're also tentatively, planning. It hasn't been designed yet. Feasibility for as far as geotech hasn't really been completed yet, but that's where the green area is where they would propose to mitigate on site. The idea being that they could meet the district's no net loss policy in Rule E. Obviously, WACA would require a 2-to-1 impact replacement, so the remaining credits that they're not able to squeeze on the site would be via bank credit purchase.
Cool, could you help me real quick? That big old wetland A, what classification is that one?
I'd have to look, I don't remember. I'm sharing my screen, so I don't.
Yeah, no, you're good. And then if we create and add wetland, right, which is what they're gonna do with that mitigation, doesn't that become a class A typically when we do a repair?
The green would, yeah, and I had mentioned that in the TEP findings, because they had shown, I think that maybe it's on the 25-foot buffer, and I just mentioned, hey, if this turns into mitigation, we're gonna require a larger buffer than that, so. And they did provide that response in the response to TEP comments. I just haven't had a chance to get through it and haven't gotten any additional comments from the TEP yet, but they acknowledged that would be the requirement.
Sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to jump in.
No, that's right, Mel. So the wetlands that are, now that I kind of see a layout potential, the wetlands to the north are not showing in this layout. It looks like they're part of kind of the.
It looks like that weird
system,
dot.
and there was mention in the sequencing application, a couple of cases where incidental wetlands were under WACA.
Yeah.
Were present and
Yeah, I didn't-
Are those some of those wetlands that are shown
Yeah.
on the figure on the north?
Yeah, I didn't directly address that in my memo because I didn't really want to muddy the water too much.
Yeah.
But that was included in the sequencing application. The TEP's already reviewed that, so, it was the
So are they?
wetland C is on the south, you know, where the road is.
Mhm.
The channelized portion is that dark blue, and then I think it's wetland B, right?
Yeah.
Up on the, what looks like the north area.
Yeah.
In truth, Nicole, it wasn't clear to me reading it through which ones were deemed incidental. There's a statement on page 79 that kind of gave me a sense that with this comment, it says it's more appropriate to deem these areas as incidental for future permitting purposes rather than approving a no loss at the time. I was just hoping you could help me with that one too, and as it pertains to this.
Yeah, that's more of a difference in interpretation of WACA. If there's not an impact that's being proposed yet officially, I'd rather have it as a jurisdictional determination and not a
Gotcha.
no loss.
Okay, so that's work to be done.
Yeah, so essentially, we would approve those areas of wetland as incidental, so they wouldn't, you know, need to be preserved or replaced when the grading permit application or the replacement plan comes in.
Okay.
I generally like to see a no loss when there's more design flushed out and there's an actual ask for that impact.
Mhm.
Right now, I think it's just, since everything's still up in flux, I think it's cleaner to just change the jurisdictional, or to approve a non-jurisdictional status for those areas. It'll streamline permitting in the long run.
Well, I have a lot of wetland questions, but maybe I will step back from those. What kind of setback is there from 694? So from a standpoint of moving the project slightly to the north, I know you've gone through lots of thinking from a sequencing standpoint, but are you running up against a MnDOT setback?
Yeah, you can see the outline of the actual property that we'll own. We're pretty much right up that setback. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've pushed it as far north as we could, and really we chose the west instead of the east because it's laid out just a little better to mitigate the impact. So.
And on the east side, there's a sanitary sewer easement, so that would not be eligible for inclusion, either wetland mitigation or buffer. So the buffer and mitigation have to be located outside that easement for access.
Who's the property owner? Just if you continue this west, there's some plot of land there.
MnDOT.
It's MnDOT.
Yep. And so one of our alternative sites was actually, we approached MnDOT, and they were not interested in selling that parcel.
I've been around not as long as everybody else in the room, but when's the last time we had an impact of 1.5 acres?
Yeah, I was trying to look it up, and I ran out of time here before this meeting, but the last impact that came close was 9 years ago, for a commercial property in Woodbury.
What's your definition of close?
I can also.
I feel like that one was around.
It was around an acre.
Yeah.
And this, I remember when I looked previously, just for context and precedent purposes, that commercial property was less than the impact that's being proposed here, but it was the closest that we got to that, and it was in.
Would it be helpful if I had some context to the history of the site?
Oh, there.
Okay. Do you have your cursor up there? See that?
Yeah, it's kind of on a delay, so.
To the north there, wetland B, that's a conveyance in that right away. So stormwater, there's several culverts up there, conveying water from north to south, and then from east to west into B. And then between B and the portion that's ditched, that dark blue, that was a incidental that was created. You can see it up total slope there on the west side of the topography. That was created when there was a loop, an off ramp from 694 at one time on the MnDOT property. So that ditch was essentially cut through that area. So a lot of water flows from right of way off, the wetland does extend off the property from that right of way there, you just can't see it in the dark line. And then conveys down south into the existing culvert. And then there's another culvert, you can see kind of the tail of Wetland Bay where it's not impacted. Under that, there's a gravel driveway that goes up to a billboard sign up there. That also abuts the Beltline interceptor, which has a 30-foot easement on the east side, which is kind of that white area. This area was impacted, from what we have seen in historical photos. There is several feet of fill from construction 694, and there's some good photos actually in the sequencing application that shows that this whole area was filled as part of the construction. And then down on the south there, County Road T Court, that was the original west-east thoroughfare through there, which had a underpass under, at that time, the railroad. That was ripped up, and we have some photos from I think it was the 70s when they did a phase one, or they did assessment out there, which showed that area essentially ripping out that gravel and taking that road offline. So that the road currently ends on the very west portion of the site. So there's a gravel strip along that edge there. So that area was heated as well. So just a little bit of history. There's several feet. There's one boring up by the bridge, the northeast corner from MnDOT, which does show that there's a couple of feet of fill in that area. That's what we encountered during the delineation as well. A lot of scrub brush, buckthorn, cottonwoods, some box elders in that area on top of that fill. So the outlet is the southwest corner. Stormwater from the areas to the east conveys through a relatively new culvert into the wetland. So this is somewhat of a sloping wetland from east to west, and then discharges underneath the southwest corner of County Road D Court.
Just from a watershed and flow. So this is the water is flowing to the south and probably west, correct? Is it this in the Coleman? Watershed?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Might be
I
Willow
was
Creek.
wondering if it was Willow Creek or
Yeah.
Willow Lake, but it just, in my head, I'm thinking this is more likely going down like past Costco and whatever into
Yeah.
Coleman.
Yeah, I mean, eventually it would go to Coleman regardless, yeah.
Right.
You're just looking it up, PPH, right by Willow Lake, but I can't tell if it's Willow.
I think Willow Lake would actually be in the north,
Here. Oh, yeah.
and it would flow to the west of this, I'm thinking.
Yeah, just south is the major watershed boundary, but it does flow south anyway, so, but it's technically part of the Willow Creek.
Is there one watershed you're worried about more than another?
No, though Coleman has just been delisted.
I agree with you on that one.
And we're talking about other things going on there.
I'm trying to figure out, and I'm just more of a picture person. When you were looking at different designs for this, could you just walk me through the process on, I know this sounds like it's where you got as least mitigation. When I look at the land around, I was wondering if your goal was to incorporate a little bit more. Oh, there's these pictures to it.
Yep, so these figures go with what was provided in the board packet. So if there's a particular alternative that you are interested in discussing further, here's one with the building on the east side of the property instead of the west.
That's not better.
Do all of the alternatives, except for, I think one of the alternatives had, well, maybe a couple had smaller numbers of units and then consequently smaller numbers of parking space. So what I'm leading to is I'm wondering about alternatives of parking, and I recognize the city's need for near to. Had there been any thought about doing a multiple tier parking to cut down the amount of footprint?
multiple tier, like multiple levels, sorry, I'm not.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you have a parking garage one, just as, it's not a good example, but if you did 2 levels of parking, like what is it? How, the parking situation takes out what it looked like in the preferred one, figure 8, the bulk of that wetland. And I'm just trying to figure out, sounds like Mark and I are trying to figure out what other alternatives y'all consider.
Yeah, so to answer the first question, we looked at, I don't know, 6 or 7 alternatives, but to keep it consistent, we stuck at the same unit count. We actually have a funding award from Met Council based on the 180 units. So we did several alternatives that showed, you know, if we kept the unit count the same and we did a no impact or minimum impact, what would that look like? And in some of the extreme examples, that would be you know, a 10-story building with 30 parking stalls that just isn't feasible. In terms of your request to do 2 levels of parking, I think there'd be 2 concerns. One, we're kind of capped at our height. You know, we pushed to a 7th story, which frankly, we've never done. We wouldn't expect, I don't want to speak for Nolan, but I think that would be above the city's height restrictions. Because to do 2 levels of parking and keep the unit count, you know, you'd have to still have the 5 levels of housing.
What if you had a stacked parking and, yeah,
yeah, so you cut your lot in half effectively, your at grade lot. So your footprint goes down, and from a visual standpoint, I'm not speaking for the city, but your building profile is, you know, a few stories above that potential multiple layer parking. And I don't know if the city would think of that or not, but.
Are you kind of saying in the, if you don't mind, are you suggesting like if we had a level of parking in these green spaces here, or?
No,
Even on top of the parking
Like
itself,
a parking ramp.
separated parking ramp.
So that you had a parking ramp, so instead of your current parking being, I don't know, half an acre, just a full number, it would be a quarter of an acre. But it would be a quarter of an acre, you know, at 2 levels, or maybe 3.
building on that concept or separating it out where that there isn't a wetland up by that parcel line and reconfiguring it to where the parking's up here and it's not just consuming that wetland space. Right, it's hard to do.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So if you suggested stacking up 2 up here, like 2 levels up here, as an idea, not saying that that's the goal, but like, if you can minimize this. And what I was proposing, just another thought, is what if you figured out how to use this area, because look, most of this consumed, obviously there's a little bit about the building, but a lot of this parking lot consuming your wetland, so.
Okay.
Like, what other thoughts?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 different concepts there. One, candidly, a structured parking is going to be cost prohibitive and just kind of dead on arrival. The idea about putting surface, so you're basically saying move your surface lot from where the wetland is to kind of the northeast where there's no wetland. Is that
It's another suggestion.
That's a suggestion.
I'm not an architect or designer, but what I see is a bunch of green and what I see is a bunch of red and they look similar.
That one we could look at. Travis, do you have any immediate?
You know, 2 things with geotechnically, it's gonna be in it. I think the bigger issue is fire apparatus access. So you have to look at a lot of turning radiuses with structures in the way coming from County Road East. So the access to this is the southwest corner. You can see it on that. So if you start, you'd have to look at the turning radiuses of those trucks coming in and potentially do an alternative route on the east side which may actually increase wetland impacts on the side of the project. So we can't go into that easement area. So that means you'd have to go left, which would be on the east side of Wetland Bay. And then you'd have to somehow cross that culvert and that conveyance. So there would be a wetland impacts there to have a secondary access.
I guess I'm looking for how much, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So look, what I see on the diagram is the access points here, the inroads here, is that correct?
The access is on the left side.
It's on the left side
Yep.
over here?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard to see, it's right where her cursor is right there. It's
Oh.
right in there. So one thing to mention, the impact associated with wetland C on the south is a private access for emergency access only. That is not a public road, that's not what's proposed. So that actually would be gated, so there's two access points to the site, one from the left, one from the east, coming into the site with the driveway apron on the southwest corner. And then stormwater management would be underneath the parking area, and then some, depending on fit, some surface EMPs where they would.
Just for the historical context, that previous approval in 2016 was 1.1 acres. This is 1.53 of replaceable impacts.
And the supplemental information, design is, we're still progressing through design here. That impact actually went down slightly to 1.37 with retaining wall, so that red line got shifted to the west. We were able to confirm that here a week ago, so.
What about water in that site? If it's coming from what looks like here down to the. Knowing that, I believe it was holding water last time I was there. Is it still holding water, that area?
So the deepest water or wetland regime is on the southwest corner. It's kind of a sloping wetland.
Yeah.
There's a fair amount coming from the east as well. What we'd like to do in the mitigation is, we started early conversations with the DEP, but I would like to try to tie into wetland B to the north for a conveyance. But again, it depends on what's gonna fit well for the site as well as consideration of buffers. So what you have here is we have an assumed 25-foot buffer on the east side. The most current graphic that was submitted does incorporate the 75-foot, so it does reduce the green quite a bit to I think 0.99 is what we had. But we have the flexibility for that area. Again, the outlet area for this site is from fill. So the idea would be to scrape the fill down to the native wetland soil and incorporate design considerations for the mitigation of that. So we haven't got to that part yet, but we work with that to incorporate that information.
I've been asking a lot of questions. I want to open it up for others.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, we could probably discuss this a while. I would just say I'm having some problems with the size of that impact. One of the notes in the sequencing report contents application that Nicole included in the packet, there's a note about soils and groundwater, and it doesn't specify, 100% of groundwater. That just implies what's written, that a large part of this, substantial part, is groundwater. So knowing that there's fill, we're really only talking about, the expressed current surface feature, but the reality is you excavate and you're gonna have, that's all volume of water that's gonna have to be treated, managed from a larger watershed concept. I mean, that's a real concern, or you haven't provided any, and you probably haven't done any yet, given the stage that you're at, which, by the way, I really appreciate you coming early on in the process. We rarely have this kind of opportunity. It's usually like at the end, and we, approve or disapprove. So I really appreciate that. But jumping back, no geotech. I understand what you're saying, Travis, in terms of you expected this. Historically, a large part of this was probably wetland that's now been filled, but you're going to take all of that out and to get to some stable soils, just from a building standpoint. And I don't know, it seems to me like I'm gonna have a problem with it.
I think that's well stated. When I read the packet, not saying that this is related, I just remember what popped into my head is we better start planning a retrofit program for this, because I think we're gonna have some water management things. I know y'all are early on, but you know, we see these family homes, these multifamily homes needing retrofit for managing water. And that's the first thing that popped in my head. It's like, we might as well start planning for it now, reading what I've read. I have concerns of it. I'd love to see other options where we can find ways to use more of the green space away from it. I just think that the wet area, it's also what it looks like in the land. It's all looks like it's a low spot in the area. Is that fair? This area is generally low spot with the surrounding, at least in this picture when you look at the contour maps. So it's gonna be drawing water, at least what I'm worried about.
I would go off of your end of things too, definitely like the concerns with, especially being in that area, day to day for work. There's a lot of streams also down in that area that, kind of go off of each other there. And I would say for sure, like a concern about the flooding risk of the area once it's developed on. And then to see how that impacts all of the other little streams along the way, down in that spot, so. I definitely think there could be a lot of kind of side effects of it, but.
I commend the concept of project. I mean,
The outcome of the project is great. It's
Yeah.
absolutely needed. It's just like, man, we're gonna have to start planning some dollars to help y'all out on managing the water once it's built. My big fear.
Mhm.
So I appreciate the feedback. I guess my question, you know, it's our intent to follow all the watersheds rules with 1-to-1 on-site replacement and then 2-to-1 total replacement. And so we've been kind of viewing this from the approach of let's meet the rules. And then also, you know, the point of us bringing it forward now is we understand that even with meeting all your rules, it's still a large impact, and that's something you've typically seen. I think it was 1.1 acre in the last 9 years was the biggest project. So I guess I think I'm hearing concerns about the projects. You want to explore some potentially different alternatives. I don't think we can come up with something radically different. I think we can explore potentially addressing some of the comments. I guess my question is there where's the line, right? If we're currently impacting, this says 1.5, I think Travis, you said.
Well, yeah.
1.3, I guess, is there a number you're comfortable with? I think, you know, for us, it's kind of tough because again, we're trying to meet all your rules.
I would generally say the rules are there to protect the wetland, not build over them.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know if the rules actually pertain to, hey, you're gonna fill this and, you know what I mean? So I'm happy y'all meeting the rules. That's wonderful. That's part of the job, and I get it. If y'all can come back with some alternatives, just considering it. I think what kind of also worried me when you said the 1.3 and then the 75-foot buffer means that actual placement's it's less than an acre. So you're impacting more than an acre, you're gonna mitigate less than an acre. So you're buying a lot more credits than you think. And so I'm just trying to get a sense. The on-site replacement doesn't sound like it's feasible. So in the current configuration. So if y'all think through the alternative rule, use the rules, use some of our thoughts, talk to people who are smarter in architecture than we are, and just see, you know. And really, if a stacked system or stacked parking isn't there, or the fire can't, the emergency services can't get there, those are really good constraints. I didn't read them, just frankly, when it came through, but you know, I'd love to see more of it.
It's just to provide a response to your question about, you know, the 1.5, or, you know, less than that is, you know, what's the number that kind of triggers it? Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure there is a magic number. I think our rules are intended to, and for that matter, WACA is intended to, you know, we implement that to not having any impact. So in one sense, that's what we'd really like to see, but in a project like this, in a site like this, that's, you know, not the case. There's gonna be some impact. So what's too much and what's acceptable, I don't think there's a book black.
Okay.
you know, black and white.
I mean, I don't want a solution anymore. I'm trying to play Tetris with the thing.
Yeah.
It's not what you need us to do.
If I can add on stormwater management, we're not to that point yet, sign. But to partially answer your question, for conveyance coming from the east, we are looking at putting in structure potentially on the southeast corner where the red is, that would take that flow. So that would not be incorporated through the underground system at all, it'd be separated.
So would that be volume or would that be treatment? You
That
know,
would be volume and rate for existing flow coming into the site.
Yeah.
From the east. So whether that's structure and or open cut system, open ditch, to be determined on that.
Sure.
The underground system would be just for the treatment of the impervious, the rate control volume, all the requirements for a state and the score and watershed coming from the development side. So it would actually be separated from the inflow from the east.
I just making sure that I'm being respectful of time. You know, it'd be great to see alternatives. I actually don't see any problem with y'all continuing looking at how to manage the groundwater, stormwater. I think if you're willing to come back and show us kind of what y'all learned beforehand, that would be really helpful. I am worried about water in that site, both now and in the future. We've had some pretty dry years. A wet year, I don't know what that's gonna look like. So I'd love it if y'all could take the feedback and then come back and show us what you come up with. Does that work?
Sure. Yeah, and there's several other alternative layouts here, you can see from the application. I think half of them, so we looked at with associated potential wetland impacts and reasons why those don't work, and you know, we've had meetings with the town and kind of went over this, so that's why we wanted to present it to you. And the replacement plan that moves forward would be likely in July, we're thinking. Like I said, design is underway right now, so still some things to work through there related to that. As far as concerned with groundwater, geotechnical has to be done on the site. We have a rough idea of what that looks like, but that'll drive the alternatives from foundations and those types of things. So it may not be a full soil correction, maybe structural, could be a combination of things.
So wait a minute, why weren't these preferred?
It's discussed in the
Yeah,
narrative
it's-
portion,
I
but.
apologize. It's really hard to link the two in my brain.
Yeah, no, I understand. So this one was, due to only
Thank
providing,
you.
yeah, access and only providing 62 units. That magic number is 180, as I understand. This one was also emergency access related and probably not enough parking, I don't recall off the top.
Yeah, that one's 9 stories, which isn't
Oh.
feasible, and then also the parking's below one stall per unit, which we don't feel is appropriate at about 0.7 parking stall.
In conflict with the bell line, the 30-foot.
Not our
Makes sense.
development.
Yeah, I wrote it down to ask you later.
Yeah, we also have a pipe that we own
Okay.
developments.
And then the cul-de-sac turnaround, conflicting with the trail. Some things there too.
This one,
When is your deal, when do you think the geotechnical work will be
Soon as we get further down design, that's gonna dictate a lot of the soil corrections, what's happening, what out.
Yeah.
Structural.
We are trying to get you guys scheduled for just a few preliminary borings later this month. It won't be the full geotech report for the building, but it'll at least be a few boring locations to get some information.
The one, soil boring that was completed up to the northeast by the billboard, for the trail. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, 4 feet of fill, organic, at 4 feet below grade. And, water reserve between 4 and 6, now it's summer,
what, water, what,
4 to 6 feet.
goes down?
Yeah.
Below mineral?
Below grade.
Okay. So it goes below the mineral.
So, right at the mineral at 4 feet, inorganics at 4 feet.
I guess that's, I mean, not knowing, I'm not familiar with the area other than what I can see through Google Maps, but I guess my biggest concern is you're building on a lot of a wetland and, you know, in wet years, it's gonna. A lot of the work that has been going on in the watershed is to mitigate impact of this. And I would hate to have your residents, and it's a great, much needed project, but I would hate to have the quality of their life impacted by water. Negative. Without knowing any more, that's my initial feel based on the information that I've seen.
Summarize.
This wetland already is piped through culverts, correct?
At the southeast side.
The southeast, it's got one control structure. Has there been any studies showing that is gonna be sufficient? Does that need to be upsized? Obviously, that has downstream effect to the rest of our system. I'd certainly encourage looking at any alternatives and in realizing this project, because everyone has said it is a good project and much needed. But you know, from a regulatory standpoint, we also have to follow our rules, and if they're meeting those rules, I don't know that it's in our power to tell them no.
Yeah, we haven't obviously gotten an application in our stormwater management plan. They'd have to meet rate control. And if that's the ultimate discharge point, they have to meet existing rates at that point, or for the site as a whole.
My questions are understanding of the amount of rate. I just don't have a good sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know existing runoff rate.
All right, does that work?
Yeah, I guess, trying to think through the sequencing is a staff approval along with TEP input. So I'm wondering if it's appropriate to either extend the deadline of that sequencing to address some of these and your other alternative that you would like explored. Or if that's something that you would review during a replacement plan review in later this summer. And I would look to your preference and what makes the most sense at this point.
What happens when you extend it, Nicole? Okay, I just was curious.
I have to provide notification and the reason why for the extension, because the 60-day decision deadline is in 10 days. So I would have to do something before 10 days, either approve, deny, or extend the deadline.
And Travis, you said you guys are moving forward, hopefully getting the design in July, you said?
So grading, Laux is leading civil engineering aspects, so they're underway right now on grading. They don't have the utility.
So if we ask to postpone, that work can continue, correct? We're not slowing the work.
No,
The decision is just on the wetland delineation, right? So
Well, that's-
what does
And
extending
double check that we don't like.
what does extending it really get them or us?
the decision is essentially an acknowledgement that they have a sufficient avoidance and minimization analysis. But I'm hearing you would like to see more minimization efforts.
That's what we're suggesting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
But the other thing I just, or whatever, clarity. That sequencing and that timeline and a lot of our conversation, but is really around WACA. Is it
Yeah.
not?
yeah,
And
not
so
related.
WACA,
Yeah.
you know, just
Mhm.
the
That's
fill of that surface wetland,
Mhm.
and that is certainly important. I'm not diminishing it. We do implement WACA. But I think the district and our set of rules, we have broader issues in terms of rate control, groundwater, surface water, how that, you know, quality, quantity is managed, and, you know, WACA really doesn't directly
Yeah.
deal with those things.
So then you're proposing move forward with the sequencing and then we'll see it again later this summer. How do other people feel about that?
I would like to see this.
It could be an approval condition to include that additional analysis in a replacement plan, which you would ultimately take action.
Correct, great.
Right.
And that time.
That way we
that
would
would
have
be
to wait
right.
another month to approve the sequencing. It could be approval condition based on the comments that.
I think that sounds comfortable. You know, just we've had a few dry years. This is gonna get wet. I don't know what it'll look like. I'd like to hear more information about what it looks like here and then downstream. And then alternatives if possible.
Yeah, is there any other, there was also environmental review happening this summer as well. And I don't know, Nolan, if you, or if anyone knows the exact timeline for that, maybe June.
Yes.
So an environmental assessment worksheet would be done just for the general site conditions. I guess what I'm asking is, do you want another or need another touch point before a replacement plan is in front of you? I mean, you wouldn't have to necessarily, if you have
I think it's best
issues with
just
the
to let
replacement
the,
plan, you could
I'm more
table it.
conservative on things. I'd like to see things, but I don't think it's needed. I don't think it's necessary.
I don't know that we need to nickel and dime it.
That's my
Obviously,
thought.
it's gonna probably come back to the TAP.
Yeah,
Or these conversations with staff and, you know, if it comes to a point where you guys are comfortable and feel like it's a viable, you know, given some of what we already said.
yeah.
And I agree with that sentiment. So I wouldn't, and we don't want to gate them on our meeting.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, on behalf of their team, proceed at your own risk, but there are concerns.
We have concerns. So
Yeah.
I'd love to, when you guys do the replacement plan, I'd love to see how some of those concerns are met and addressed. That would be great when we bring it back up through, which we'd have to do anyway, right?
Yeah, you, the board is the decision maker for any replacement plans through WACA. You would also obviously be reviewing the grading permit and the associated variances with that for the actual construction.
Yeah, let's just make sure that we allocate enough time for it when it comes through.
Sure.
We'll talk to Tina about it. We'll talk to Paige Tina.
Helpful, thank you. Thank you. for the
Ye-
presentation.
Yeah, if I may, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk through this. Not every jurisdiction allows for this upfront discussion and basically says, you know, have all your ducks in a row and your full design and we'll talk about it. And then you spend the time and the money to end up, you know, having this discussion, which is very informative. So I do thank you for your time this evening and, you know, we'll proceed based on this discussion and hopefully we find a solution that works for all parties. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I told Blaine you don't have to stick around for the rest of the meeting. You're welcome.
There's snacks over there.
Yeah.
That's there.
Ben, if you don't mind, that was, you said 9B?
That was 9B.
We're already at 10.
Yes.
Where's Eric? Eric.
Oh, him up.
You're up.
Nicole, may I ask a question while we're in between?
Yeah,
Did we need a vote or anything on the, what you said about that we're in the 60-day approval window and you want to do the conditional approval? Did that require a board vote at all? Okay,
no. I just have to
just checking.
do something before May 17th on the WACA application. That'll be on.
Got
the-
it. Okay. Sounds good.
Otherwise, it's automatically approved if you don't take action in 60 days.
Great. That's why I didn't know if you needed something formal, but if you can do it, that's great.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, Nicole, how do we ensure that the notes, requests that came from the board are translated appropriately for that group?
Yeah, I took notes, but I'll probably look into the transcript again before I finalize the notice of decision and approval conditions.
Would you mind sending out more of that detail?
Yeah, I'll send the full sequencing application. I wanted to include it initially, but was overruled because it would have been a lot.
Yeah, I totally see that.
So, yeah, I can send you that. I can also send you the first round of tip comments that we had back in January. I also would cut that from the last minute board submission, so. Yep, I can definitely do that.
There's no fault here. I think you gave us enough of a good discussion. My word.
Yeah, okay.
After you, Eric.
All right, should I go or should we? Well, board call.
You're good.
Yeah, all right, I'll go. So yeah, so this is mostly just a summary of the for water quality annual report. Go through lakes, creeks, BMPs, and some new studies. So first, lake and pond water quality monitoring. Just a little background. We sample at the deepest point. We sample every 2 to 3 weeks. We monitor ice out for all the lakes, and then plus June through September, which is the growing season. We take sound measurements through the water column and take water samples at the top 2 meters and the bottom, again, phosphorus or chloride or clay. So this, just jumping right in, this is a snapshot of 2024 and whether place met parameters or met the state standard for each of these parameters.
Can I ask you a question on that, Eric?
Yeah.
So do you have what it looked like in 2023?
I don't. I was thinking that'd be a good thing in the next time around of showing the comparison because this was a particularly bad year.
Yeah, I didn't
for
remember
lakes.
this much red.
We had intense rain events followed by periods of drought. So a lot of lakes took really big dips in water quality of one parameter or all. So yeah, so on the left side, we have the lakes and then impairments and then, yeah, so a lot of lakes took a big hit. But this is just a snapshot. Lakes can change from year to year quite a bit. So we really want to look at 10-year trends. Red is worsening, gray is no change, and blue are improving. So we can see here there are some worsening trends. Coleman Lake and Tanners both have worsening trends for all major 3 parameters. You're seeing some here too, trending worsening trends for chloride with Owasso, Phelan, Snail, and Quinn. Here is highlighting a couple of lakes, different parameters, and what big drops they took last year. Some we haven't seen this kind of drop or this level of water quality in 5 years. Some like Jarvis for chlorophyll A, since we've been monitoring, chlorophyll hasn't been that high ever as we monitored. So it was just a pretty bad year. This is Tanner's Lake. Again, this is the one that was worsening trends for all 3, which is kind of surprising. It's usually kind of one of the jewels of our lakes. I will talk about this later as I talk about the alum plant. That's a major factor of what I think is happening. Coleman, we all know now that the alum treatment has run its course. You can see here the worsening trends and why we're going to do another alum treatment. And then on the right side, here's Owasso Lake with improving trends.
I don't understand that, honestly. Owasso Lake improving. Could you spend some time? What thoughts do you have on? There were 2 lakes that were improving. Owasso was improving across 3 out of the 4.
Yeah.
Graphic. Why would that be?
Don't know. Aaron, do you have any?
Well, I don't know that we've dissected that specifically, but you know, lakes, they're all really different. Owasso is a deep lake. I don't know what its watershed to lake ratio is. I don't know off the top of my head what the internal load.
Yeah, this
Looks
one
like for that,
kind of tied into some
but-
really interesting lakes. It just was
Mhm.
it's surprising as the size of it. The other ones were smaller.
Yeah, I mean, they all have their special constellations of impacts and that, you know, lead them to better or worse water quality. we haven't really unpacked that, is my bottom line.
It's okay.
Yeah.
it-
Yeah,
it-
you're right to ask, I mean, it's,
You're
behaving
doing
differently than.
something right there. I do see
Yeah,
it sort of downturning toward the end of the year on a couple of them, so maybe it's, you know, that trend for the next year being kind of bad, but on the whole, it's not bad. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, there's some oscillations over the last 10 years, but it overall has been not so bad. I'm wondering the role of some of the fish work. If that might, because that's relatively
Yeah.
recent, if that might not be making a difference.
Mhm.
The carp work you're saying?
Corporate, yep.
Well, they just started building an apartment complex on the part of that, the Wassel Lake toward the end, where they're doing some cleaning out. Now I'm curious about that too. I just don't know what it look like.
Next, we're going to creek water quality monitoring. And with creeks, we do base flow grabs every 2 weeks year round, and then storm samples spring through fall. Take flow measurements every 6 weeks. We take sound measurements when we go out, and then water samples.
So we don't have anything in this. I'm trying to freaks.
We do a little, well,
Flow probably. but-
flow, yep. It's just with the equipment and freezing thaw, there's a lot of stuff that's pretty sensitive. But we do have a lot of equipment out, but we're not taking storm samples or runoff samples during those times.
So most of the data is based off grab sample.
Grab samples in the wintertime, yeah. Then here again, another snapshot of last year. I threw a beltline in here, we kind of treat it like a creek. It's obviously a huge storm sewer, but so take that with a grain of salt.
Might be a creek someday.
Someday. So here we see Battle Creek, Fish Creek, and Beltline.
Did
Now
Coleman Creek change with respect to last year?
I don't know. I'd have to look at that again. I like that idea of including the past year.
Yeah, I apologize. Because like I knew Battle Creek was typically a problem child. For some reason, I thought Coleman was too. I could also look. It was around this time last year.
And then here are the trends over the last 10 years. Again, worsening, no trend and improving. See here, Battle Creek is worsening trend for nitrate, Fish Creek worsening for phosphorus, chloride, Beltline for nitrate, and Coleman Creek for chloride. Now jumping at BMPs. This is the Allen plant. Tanner's Lake's watershed installed in '98. Add Allen to stormwater and base flow, lines of phosphorus, creates flocks, settles out in the pond, goes over the berm into dishes through wetlands and then to Tanner's. So when I was talking about Tanner's Lake water quality drop, so the results in 2024 average TP removal is 52%, but from '98 to the present, the average has been 70%. So there's been a pretty big decrease in removal over the last 5 years. Well, in 2019, we updated the system. We had new pumps, new piping, kind of new programming in, and it's not how it was before. So in drought times, we have, well, part of the plant is we can't have a pH of 6 leaving the site. So it automatically shuts down at 6.2. So we were always constantly worried about that. And then in drought years, we were overdosing, and we had to have large amounts of Allen at the inlet with a really low pH. So we were worried about dropping the pH for the whole pond. So we just shut the system down, wait for a rain event to happen to kind of flush it out, and then start the system out. What that means is we're sending untreated water through. So we weren't dosing that. And then also after doing some dosing tests, I think we're also underdosing at high flow. So we're kind of hit at both points. What we're doing now is we've already increased the dosing by 20% after doing some pump testings. then we're gonna get somebody to help us program and just stop dosing or reduce dosing at those very, very low flows. So we can keep the plant running, not have to shut it down. Hopefully get those phosphorus removal rates back up.
So historically, I know, just say from 2019 back, it was pretty much dosing all along, just on a continual
Yeah.
basis.
Yep.
Now we're trying to tune it maybe a little better with the new pumps.
Yeah.
And all that, to where we can actually dose in a flexible way.
Mhm.
So hopefully we would see some of these treatment removals improve.
Yes, yes. And part of it too is like the pumps we have, say it's that pumping at such a volume, but then you test it, it's not quite doing that. So it's kind of massaging the system a little bit to make it work how we want. And after a few years, you weren't quite sure if it was real or not, the results we were getting, but now after a few years, we really can start to
Clean that pump.
Yes. We monitor it every year, and when it gets about half full, we clean it out.
Wondering about internal road there.
It's a clay bottom, so
With lots of alum in it.
yeah, it's lots of.
Yeah.
But just.
It's a constant alum treatment for that pond, yeah, so internal load is really unlikely.
Yeah.
There, yeah.
I believe the last year we cleaned it out was 2020 or 2021. 2020.
It does happen in a lot of ponds, but.
Yeah.
Next, we have the Frost Canard spent line chamber. Wakefield Lake, it's a watershed, media spent line. Installed in 2018, start monitoring in 2019. This treats high flows and stormwater. Spent line needs to dry out between rain events. So that's why it's just treating high flows and stormwater. 2024 TP removal was 64%. TSS 92, and ortho removal 20. The overall reductions are about the same, so it stayed pretty consistent. But you can see with that high TSS removal in this picture here, it is collecting a lot of sediment, so it's something we keep an eye on, along with our monitoring to make sure everything's going okay. At some point here, though, I think we're going to have to clean it out. Next is the Willow Pond Continuous Monitoring and Adaptive Control, also known as Willow CMAC. This is in the Bennett Lakes watershed. The media again spent line. This was installed in 2019. But unlike the Frost Canard spent line filter, this takes water from the pond and not stormwater. This whole system is we can control it remotely, or BAR can control it remotely. And it's highly programmable. The idea is that once we dial in the system, we could have open up the valve for 8 hours, let it flow through, and find out it needs to dry for 12 hours, and it dries down, and then we open the valve again, so we can have this continuous flow and treat water as it goes. Fortunately, in 2019 through 2023, there are hardware issues. There's drought, there's a broken weir that was controlling the level of the ponds. So we couldn't get water into the system and test it correctly. Last year, finally, everything's been fixed. And we're able to do 3 rounds of testing, each of them for about 4, well, each was 4 hours apiece. TP removal is 26%, ortho 13, TSS 36. While those are kind of low, you can see graph on the right, they seem to be improving. So maybe we had to kind of flush the system, and we'll see how those continue to go. We have another test scheduled for this springish, if this is spring. And then we'll see where we'll go from there, and if more testing is needed, or we can start experimenting in other ways.
So those 3 graphs on the right, those are your 3 sample events, 2024. So those removal rates are probably the average of the 3, but it looks like overall they were relatively constant. As far as, it wasn't like we had a lot more removal in the summer versus in the
Yeah. Now we have Wakefield Lake experimental iron and granite sand filter. This is the Wakefield Lake watershed. The media is iron and granite. This was formerly our first spent line filter when we tested it out, but we changed the media in 2022. You can see in that first year, the TP removal rate was very low, ortho was very low, and actually we exported sediment from the pond, and we're thinking that the granite wasn't washed correctly. So if we had a full year of water through that, then the TP removal, PSS removal, and ortho all pumped up to much better numbers.
Can you just briefly explain how this system, when you're looking from south to north?
Yeah, it's not the best picture for
No,
all.
but in that, in the brown area is where the granite iron is probably, the bed is there.
Mhm.
And then you've got that embayed kind of pond, lake. I mean, how does that function? Is that like a settling? And then you get the lake to the north beyond it.
Yeah, so water comes off the street, it's split, it goes kind of around the treatment cell, and then it infiltrates down, and you see the orange
Yeah.
deal there. Water goes through there and then outlets into the pond. And that's where we have our sampling.
And the split, I have, like 3 weeks ago, I happened to walk this area and I've always wanted to, I just really kind of more curious. So it splits
The
the flow. Is it a continuous split volume? In other words, whatever the number, is it always 40% or, you know, maybe 80% that's going through the inlet and 80 or whatever the number through the treatment, or does it vary? Do we have the ability to control that split?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, so a part of the inflow is not being treated, not going through this, is that correct?
In high flows, it can go over the bank.
Okay.
Which does happen sometimes, but for the most part, I think we're getting a good amount of treatment for most of it through the system.
So the, I've been there, off to the right, to the east, there's a grate, the, you know, trash rack and so forth, that's an inlet and it looks like. That's not coming through this treatment system.
There's a trash rack in the pond.
You know, I think it's off to the right of the photo, maybe the east of the photo. I'm just trying to understand. I don't, someday maybe I should. take a tour of it.
Yeah, sure,
If we'd be willing to.
yeah,
Dave has his hand up too.
Dave, go.
Oh, there we go. So this area where the treatment cell runs off, there's just a single catch basin up on the road. And on either side of the catch basin, I'll call it about 75, 100 feet or so, where the road funnels into this treatment cell. And then the small pond that you're looking at, the grates that you're talking about are from different catch basins around the area. And those go directly into the lake itself. So the treatment cell and this treatment is off of one catch basin in the road.
I know what you're talking.
Yeah, there's a big flared
The
end
big
section.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's taken from a bigger area.
Okay, yeah,
And
when you
this
said
little-
there was split, I thought it was like.
Yeah, no, this is just a tiny little
Yeah,
catch
okay.
basin.
Yeah, all right.
There is a lot of, it's a weird spot. There's a lot of infrastructure
Yeah,
there.
I didn't understand.
Yeah, yeah, that's understandable.
And I don't know if I go down there at night. There's a lot of weird stuff around there.
Yeah.
I think that's wise, during the day.
It's actually kind of a flattering photo, I would say.
It is pretty.
How frequently do we? I don't see that too often.
I think this is the first time we've done it.
So are we doing any kind of studies on it just to see how effective it is? Besides this one,
No, this is the first.
this is it.
Yeah,
How
for
long
now.
do we need to go before we're like, oh, this is a reasonable substitute or option instead of curiosity?
I mean, there's not like a set protocol, although, when I look at these numbers, they look pretty good for TP, TSS and ortho. So, I mean, this is kind of how these things start. We, throw some in the ground and monitor it, or we throw some spent lime in the ground and monitor it. So, and then after that, we, as we go through different sites and that have different, opportunities and constraints, we can consider these things at a bigger scale.
Are you doing a comparison to the earlier, because I spent mine, you do, we don't have to cover it now, I'm just like.
That would be a good thing to do.
Those are really
Yeah.
interesting
Mhm.
results that we're seeing, I'm just curious what it looked like when the spent line was there. And
Mhm.
comparable.
Yeah, we certainly have that data. We haven't presented it side by side, but we sure could. Yeah, with the same hydraulics, right? Like, what do
Yeah,
these different
that's
media
kind of
do?
the thought.
Mhm.
I will say in area, I won't. As I look at them side by side, I always, I give you a hard time almost every year about this, what's worsening, what's improving, and all that kind of stuff. As I look at them side by side, the same lakes that are worsening now, we're improving on a 10-year trend, and it's not really clear on me exactly what that means now. So, so whenever the next time around, seeing some comparison, that would be really helpful, I think.
What was that, sir?
Seeing some comparisons from one year to the other.
Yeah.
Because I looked through this and you would think like things are not going well. Because many of these were improving last year.
Mhm.
So I was like, all right, that's all. That's my own comment.
Yeah. No, that's a good comment. Yeah, I'll definitely add that. Woodland Rain Garden, which is iron sand filter. This is Coleman Lakes, the watershed, and part of Maplewood Mall. Installed in 2009, so it's been in there quite a while. Last year, TP removal was 69%, ortho 63%, and TSS 94%. And overall, throughout the life of it, it's stayed pretty consistent again compared to this year. Next is our newest UMP Arborgas CC17 filter. This is in Lake Emily, the Wassos watershed. The media is CC17, which is crushed limestone, kind of looks like gravel. It has a lower phosphorus removal efficiency, but has a high hydraulic conductivity rate. So this, unlike the spent lime that has to dry out between storm events, this can take continuous flows of storm water and base flow. So completed in 2023, we started monitoring it last year. Removal rates are phosphorus 47%, ortho 11%, TSS 93%. But we ran into some problems pretty early with the setup. We were getting low flows at the outlet. This was initially designed to outlet about 1 to 3 CFS. We were getting about 0.1, 0.3 CFS, so a magnitude lower. We ended up having to take grab samples instead of our usual flow-paced storm samples. Dave went in there with the city and our staff last week to take a look to see what was going on. They saw immediately that upper picture up top that everything was just covered in suspended solids. They raked it away. They poured some water in it and it just went right through. So just a large amount of sediment plugging up the system. So this is going to be something that's going to have to be cleaned out multiple times a year. But it is removing a lot of this TSS, but it's just going to have a lot of continual.
Is there any way that we can do more street sweeping or try to somehow manage some of the sediment load in that?
So this comes from a wetland. This system takes I don't know if it's continuous flow, would you say?
It's hard to tell because it plugged up or it filled up so early
Yeah.
that it's been hard to tell. So it's backed up to the inlet sampler, but it seems like it's
Nearly continuous flow, which is why we chose CC17. So it's tricky. Retreatment is tricky because it's suspended sediments, and it's a lot of organic material. So it's kind of good news, bad news. I mean, the good news is that would otherwise get to Lake Emily. Bad news is this filter is going to need more intensive maintenance than anticipated. Now, there were a lot of leaves. I mean, so I did not go in the structure I let Dave and Gareth do that, thanks Dave. But you know, you can see, I mean, it is a lot of mucky fines, but it's also like leaves, and I mean, imagine the stuff that comes out of a wetland. So we are gonna be looking at, you know, whether or not we should change the diversion of flow that comes in so that it's not quite so constant. There's a weir that diverts the flow and we can change that. We built that way on purpose. There might also be some other things that we can do to encourage things like minnows to not come toward the filter and instead bypass, because they were seeing a lot of that right away too, that there's a lot of minnows that come out of this wetland. Now, we didn't see like a minnow graveyard necessarily, but yeah, I was a little worried, but I don't know. So there's some things we can tinker with. But it does seem like for the short term, it was really great to see that when they pulled some of the sediment away, that water went straight down through the media as, you know, as we planned, but.
And
Dave's
another
got-
thing,
yeah.
oh, sorry, maybe
Go
this
ahead.
is what Dave was gonna say, but so we'll, help with some of the stuff, but now it's up to the city of Shoreview for me. So, we'll still be a part of it and see what changes we can make, but it is
Yeah,
Are
their
they,
system now.
are they aware? Yeah.
oh, they were there.
Yeah, they were out with Dave,
Oh,
yeah,
Is
I
there a
think
way
the whole
that-
department.
Is there a way that we can install like an internal weir?
To drop more sediment out. Well, there is
Yeah.
one, actually. There is
Yeah,
a weir that
kind
comes
of
in
have a
first.
forebay that's where the sediment
That
would
we
drop.
kind of have, we do have that in there.
Yeah.
There is a internal forebay.
So it's already, it's just gonna have to be cleaned.
It's just gonna have to be cleaned. Unfortunately, it can be vacked. It can be vacked out. It was designed to be able to be vacked. The material was tested with Schlamka. They came in and tested that they could vac up CC17. They can certainly vac that up. I don't know, Dave, if you want to add anything.
No, you guys hit it pretty good. I was just, the access points to get in there and to rake it and to clean it up. I've already met with people on site to look at it. It's maybe a couple-hour job. The most intensive labor is just in there because you're kind of crunched over a little bit. But in the design aspect of it, when they were putting it together, we have really good access. I think there's 5 or 6 access points from the top. So for raking it and to get in and working with the vac trucks and what that means. Yeah, and then we're also, what you guys hinted at is looking farther upstream for the creek to see if we can do that to help prevent some of the floaties to come in there and to be more treating water versus other things in there. But no, you guys covered it well. Thank you.
I have lots of questions I won't go to. I forgot that this is coming from a wetland, but
Yeah.
my one question is this more sediment than what we were probably expecting to come out of this wetland?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't expect that we'd see our outflow rates drop by the end of the first season it was online.
In the discussion, we talked about maintenance on this filter. I recall that conversation.
Yeah,
I don't think we had determined the frequency, but we
No.
knew it was gonna happen.
it's always a bit of a, I mean, you design so that it can be maintained. And you design media that are appropriate for the flows, but you don't really know until you
I will say
put
that
it in.
it's a bit surprising. That's. how
Yeah.
I see it.
Yep. Yep.
But good lesson learned. Throw that one away.
Next is retrench synthetic storm. We've been wanting to do this for quite a while. Maple and Mall first went in place. We tried to figure out how much water the tree trenches were holding, storing. But it was really difficult. So we dreamt up of doing this synthetic storm. Aaron and I tried 6-7 years ago to do this, and we did it. But then we had a rain event right after. So it screwed up all of it up. So we're finally able to do it last year. Again, at Maple Mall, South Side, not a lot of people there. We opened up a fire hydrant and flooded 2 tree trenches with almost 16,000 gallons of water. And then the calculated runoff was about 2,500 gallons. So between the 2 tree trenches, they stored about 13,000 gallons.
Did you do this after a prolonged dry spell?
It was very dry. This was
Pretty dry.
Yeah.
This was the best possible condition.
Yeah, it was.
Perfect.
That's a fair question. Yeah.
Yeah, so it couldn't have been any better. I do think if we do this again, it'd be fun to have some level loggers in the tree trenches to figure out how long it takes for it to draw down.
Yeah.
I've been-
So when the trenches were first installed, there were level loggers everywhere.
Yeah.
So we used to watch that quite a lot, yeah.
Next is a big study we're taking on this year, so we have Fish Creek and Battle Creek study. On the left, you can see the impairments and stressors these two creeks have. So what we're trying to find out is where the hot spots, what's causing these creeks, these impairments. So between Battle Creek and Fish Creek, we have 14 different sites we're gonna look at. We were out last week installing staff gauges so we can gauge flow through these, and throughout the season we'll be in one day after a storm event, we'll go and take grads at all of these all of these sites in one day. And then we'll do this, we're planning to do about 10 times this year to get a good idea of where the problem areas might be and where BMPs or whatever thing we can do to help improve these creeks. Next, chloride monitoring. We do early ice out and snow melt. I mentioned we do that with lakes, but we also have looked at about 30 different sites a year right after ice out, starting in 2021. In the first 2 years were all new sites. These are small ponds, ditches, kind of a little bit of everything. And started 2023, we did new sites, but also mixed in old sites that had high chloride concentrations. And yeah, we're trying to find or resample those highest concentrations. But so far the results are showing that percent impervious is the largest factor, not drainage area or land use. And last, we have PFAS monitoring. PCA and health department are leading efforts in this. They've been monitoring this since 2014. They've done multiple sites within the district, at least 7 sites along Battle Creek, inlet to Pig's Eye Lake, and then Pig's Eye dump site. And also there's been the fish consumption advisories for PFAS for Jarvis, Keller, Phelan, and Tanners and Battle Creek.
You'll just put in a grant for PFAS work, is that correct?
Yes, we submitted, well, 2 letters of intent.
Okay.
Yes, for Fish Creek and then the Coleman Alum. Yep.
That's all I have.
Cool. Thank you, as always.
Welcome.
It just is. All right.
So one curiosity, I didn't know, but I don't know if it makes sense, but as I was reading through the annual report, I didn't finish out. At the very beginning, you were going through the BMPs and there was a cost associated with it. So the first thing that comes to mind is, even if it's not in the report, would you provide a crib sheet of dollars per pound?
Yeah.
Sponsorship?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean I can't remember in the report, did it just say the cost and not the dollars per pound?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure, we could put that in. Yep.
Very cool.
Are you thinking of, since microplastics was in the news and that we have like a couple bottle caps worth of plastics in our brains? Okay.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, that's on good. Are we starting to think about monitoring for microplastics or just looking for someone to direct us to do that?
Yeah, I haven't, I don't know about how to
There is a
sample for that.
We had a report a year or 2 ago, and what they concluded was we just don't have the precision yet to actually monitor to the levels of the standards. And so there's been some, and tell me if I'm misspeaking, but that's what I recall the conclusion was. I think it was not last year, it was the year prior. After you, Dave.
Andy Erickson from the Saffel Baffle area reached out to us and actually recommended us so that there is a Eric and I are meeting a person from the U next week.
Oh,
And they
yeah,
were
okay.
curious about microplastics and what that, along with some other stuff for a big grant potential study where they might get $300,000 to $500,000 to do their stuff over a couple of years. But we're going to meet at the Allen plant just because of how the system works and how the inflow and all that works out. So we can see where it goes. I'm optimistic. It could be a pretty cool study, but we'll see after. I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday next week where we're meeting them. So kind of.
Who was that scientist who came in and gave us that talk on PFAS? You remember when that?
Was that Evan?
Somebody from Bar.
Evan Christensen from Bar.
Yes,
Mhm.
It might be
Yeah.
interesting to get a refresh on that.
Yeah,
It's on the log for
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of along with the.
we've thought
the
about,
management plan.
yeah, we've thought about trying to get someone to come in from the Department of Health or the PCA too, that the folks that are involved in the monitoring. So, yeah, that's something we could look at.
I'd love to see more of some of the comparison stuff for grant versus spent line as you're doing that CC-17. That seems like a really good lesson learned, especially with the way it was fed. Jump into the watershed management pool memos. I believe this was for our information, so if y'all have questions about it, I know definitely parts of the board have been on to instantiate some of these tools. I'll leave it be. So if you can walk through it page if you'd like, but I figure just in the interest of time, if y'all have questions, we can just jump to that.
I have a quick question. The cost benefits database. It mentions it is really a spreadsheet, track all current past EMPs. I'm just curious if there's been any thought of trying to convert that to a truer database, it could be queryable and or if it just isn't worth the time. I mean, does the spreadsheet serve the purpose?
Yeah, I think for now the spreadsheet's been working.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're looking at updating our overall database system so we could
Yeah.
see if this would tie into that too. Yeah.
And we met this year to talk about that spreadsheet
Yeah,
and ways that it
process.
could be more user friendly for staff, and like what different staff and bar folks use from that spreadsheet, so.
And I guess a related question, there's no way there isn't currently and probably not a good way to tie what's in that spreadsheet to the story map.
to the what?
The story map, you know, in each packet, there's a story map of
Yeah,
projects and so forth.
In terms of,
Some of the
like
attributes.
where the projects are.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, but even some of the attributes that can
Yeah.
be pulled, but you probably can't pull those. At least not on active, you can
Sure,
load it into the story map on a kind of static basis.
yeah. I know that, I mean, you can see, I don't think this is what you're getting at, but I know that you can see all the past projects throughout the district on the district's website, but you're wondering more about the data behind it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we can sure think about that going forward. I know one thing that has, I think is gonna be interesting is that the, district staff and bar staff use that spreadsheet to generate, a lot of different things, including that cost benefit curve that you've seen in the past and all those things. What hasn't been used for in the last few years is to actually do reporting to the pollution control agency, because they haven't had people reporting, which it still kind of surprises me, but for whatever reason, we're at a lull in reporting TMDL activities. And so when that starts back up again, depending on what that looks like, that might be a good time to think about whether or not to shift the format to make that super user friendly. For now, it's working fine and queryable, but it'll be interesting to see if the reporting requirements change the way that we're helping cities report.
As you guys proceed, I think, we saw this at the watershed management conference, but like data is going to be the power for us to make really good informed decisions. This just seems like part of that journey to figure out how to make it more effective.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's working now, there's no reason to change it, but I can totally see putting in the effort now is going to be beneficial.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. That's all, thank you.
Yeah.
As we look through the inspections and as we see the reports, I'd love to see, you guys do a good job, so I'm asking for continued consistency on it, just showing how they rank in the tools. You all know that. That's been helpful. But I like seeing it all in one place because you have to dig through multiple reports.
They're all kind of smushed together, it's hard to keep.
Are there any further questions, or I'd like to jump to the administrative report? Hey, Gina.
Yes, two things on here for upcoming meetings and dates. Emily sent you all info about the Summer Minnesota Watersheds Tour, so let her know please by May 16th. That's what, next Friday maybe, if you plan to attend and if you plan to ride the charter bus. And then another item of note is June 2nd is a deadline to submit resolutions for the Minnesota Watersheds Conference, so Tina didn't have anything pressing. If you have ideas, you can give her a call or shoot her an email with those, and then she can work to put something together.
And I think there should be some emails sent out about volunteering for the 50-year anniversary, right? I think
Yeah.
the bike tour and whatnot.
Yeah,
I
bike
think-
tour and Waterfest.
And Waterfest. And I think there's a certain number of us that need to be present at the Waterfest. I'll be there most of the day on Saturday outside of the soccer game.
Yes, yeah, there should be at least 3 of you. I think Mark, Stephanie, and Val said you could attend, so Emily or Lauren sent a doodle poll for. That might have been for something else. That was
Yeah,
for,
I was looking. for
that was just today.
Oh.
Yes, like this afternoon.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
Yes, so
definitely.
that was different than Waterfest. I think that was for the stakeholder meeting.
Yeah.
That we need people there, but yes, there's a lot going on.
Um,
So reply to that one.
I'm just curious, do people have a sense of the summer tour? I'm not sure if I'm going, I'm interested, but I've decided yet.
I know Tina's planning to be there, not riding the bus.
I can't be there.
Can't be
Yeah,
there.
I'm true.
I'm waffling.
Yeah,
It's just really.
I mean,
Drive.
if you don't know and you don't want to say, that's fine. I was curious.
that's it.
Some to the administrative report. Like we've done in prior cases, I just list, my first question is on I. And maybe before I even ask that question on I, then in that board discussion, did y'all cover the CAC and I will rewatch the recording, so I'll ignore that. I don't have a question. So my next question is on the really cool biochar stuff.
Oh.
Yeah. It is really cool.
Anybody have a question before Kate? I want to learn more about this biochar stuff.
Yeah.
I think this is a fascinating thing. Every time we turn the corner, you learn, like people use charcoal for filtering for water all the time. So I was like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, it was the topic today for the Washington County Consortium. Stephanie and Lindsay, other water that were able to attend. And I think you can watch those recordings after the facts.
Could you mind sending me one?
Yep.
I mean, I read that and I clicked on some of the links. I think it's real cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the 2 speakers were Great River Greening, so they've been scaling up small scale, so.
Yeah.
Since 2023, they've done 90. Half of that
Yeah.
is 2025 year to date, so they're just really ramping up now, just trying to reach out and find people to work with them. But that's really small scale compared to the second speaker. Washington County Waste is trying to figure out how to deal with the environmental impact of all of this emerald ash borer, the carcasses.
Yeah.
And so Washington County is looking at putting similar, I don't know exactly what Minneapolis has, but Minneapolis has a plan to put one in play in Washington County.
I'd love to pick your brain more on it. Did they do any kind of comparative studies as part of that 2025 year to date, or not so much?
We were just
Comparative.
learning.
They're just learning. Okay,
Yeah.
so these are like feasibility type of research things.
Just different small scale setups for, for their purposes, getting rid of the buckthorn that's been piling up. So that's their cleanup process.
Yeah, I'd love
For
to,
Great River Green,
Yeah.
totally different than what the county's looking at.
love to watch that. I was, oh man, every time I turn away, wood saves us. My next question is on V. Thing for V. Is Dave still on? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it's not super important. I just was curious on the Lake Wabasso stuff, Dave, when it said the residents asked for the footbridge to be removed.
Yep.
Was that coming from their lake association or is it just nearby residents?
No, that was the that was one of the property owners that live on it. I guess there's been a turnover in the neighborhood, people kind of trespassing on their property that's going in there. I mean, it is private after all. The two owners do owns it with the easement road that comes through there.
Understood.
Fair amount of people fishing. There's been some arguments maybe that have happened over the course of the time, and she hasn't felt comfortable a few times. So she's officially requested that that bridge or that connection be removed.
I had forgotten it was privately owned. Last time I was on Wabasso, there definitely were kids fishing off it. So.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I've seen them out there. It's where we do some carp stuff down the creek, but yeah.
Safety is first, I get that. My next question is on Z. I'll just cut to the chase on the Port Authority letter. So you all sent the letter out on the 25th. Have you guys had conversations?
Tina did get a response back that sounds pretty positive that they will look to pay that. They're not sure if they have the funds available in 2025 or they did ask if they could defer to 2026 if needed.
Thank you for following up with those actions.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's great. I don't think I've even heard that yet. That's awesome.
That's yes, that's new. I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Can I back us up?
Of course, yeah.
S, which is Cottage Park or Cottage, wetland restoration. I had a little bit of time earlier today and I stopped by there.
Yeah.
And I thought it looked great. I'm just curious where we're at in terms of the grading status. Is it not final grade or is it near final grade, especially in those kind of detention areas?
Yeah, well, Dave's been out there most recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're close. There's going to be some black dirt that needs to be brought in for the plantings and that stuff. So, and then they're going to do kind of a sifting of the boat to get anything smaller, anything larger than 3 inches, any rocks or anything like that goes through there. But as far as the topography and what it looks like, we won't be doing, the wetlands are all fine. They're done. Like everything inside the bio rows, the hill will be probably 3-4 inches higher after they bring in the black dirt that comes in that maybe. And then, so we're more or less done with the grading and stuff like that with it for intensive purposes. We're going to be coming in and doing herbicide planting start probably in the next week. And then maybe 10 days after that, they'll kind of start getting things in the ground. So within 2 weeks.
Yeah, cool. Those kind of low areas of wetlands, microtopography is great. We're glad to see it not be flat. It's flat to bumps.
Yeah.
So great. The hill, there's some chunks and clods of asphalt.
Yep.
Was that intentional with some stuff buried or what?
Well, so they're gonna, I mean, Dave kind of referred to that. They're still raking the whole thing, right, Dave?
That's correct.
Yeah, so they removed stuff as they went, but as you can imagine, old asphalt just was super crumbly. I mean, Dave can speak to this better than me, but they're gonna be raking that. We saw that last week too, that there's still some clumps.
Yeah.
So they're not done with that. Yeah.
It won't be 100. Yeah, it won't be 100% clean. So on the, anything under, I'd say, 2 inches or so might be left behind just by the equipment. But it'll be going through again for sure.
But so the hill itself, was there some stuff buried there that rather haul it off, or is it all soil?
Let's say that again.
Is it all soil, or was there some debris that didn't get hauled off that's buried there to create the hill?
It's all soil. I guess, I mean, there's maybe anything, a 2 to 3 inch diameter branch might be in there, but for the most part, it was all brought in. It's soil.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
the specs were, because if you remember, there was construction waste all over,
all over the place.
Yeah. So the specs were, I mean, it was a careful balance between like what's reasonable and like how can we make sure they get as much of the stuff off as possible. So there was a size that Dave's mentioning, 2 to 3 inches. We had said anything bigger than that needs to go. Anything smaller than that can stay. And that was decided in consultation with our staff who work with brownfield sites. Like, that's de minimis, that can stay, it's not dangerous, we're gonna cover it with topsoil, but there are some bigger chunks still there, so they're gonna be raking now that things are close to final placement, so.
This would be a really good one, just, before board meeting to tour.
Yes, I was supposed
It
to
looks pretty
mention that.
different,
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it does, very, very different.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we are looking at tours for probably June, July, August, cottage places on there, Roosevelt Homes, and then Cochrane Recovery Services and Aldrich Arena, Woodland Hills, kind of that area, so. We'll
Okay.
figure that out for the next few board meetings.
Cool.
Sorry to ask, but does Cottage Place get as-built survey done, like check the bottom elevations that's tying into the wetland area?
they're checking elevations, Dave,
Okay.
Dave,
And
tuned
make
up.
sure, yeah.
You think about the wetland stuff?
Oh, I just wanna, yeah, I wanna make sure it's actually wetland long-term. and
Yeah.
not Too high.
Oh, I see what you're saying, well, yeah, Dave, I don't know, do you wanna speak to that, Dave, did you hear the question?
No, that's something about elevations and wetlands, but
Checking elevations of the areas that are meant to be the restored wetland to make sure that the grades are appropriate, like they've been checking against grading plans, I assume.
yes, as far as I know, everything's on that. Yeah. As far as I know,
Yeah.
we've been checking and going through and double checking it as they've been through there, and they've been submitted. Anything outside of plans has been submitted that I know of.
Mhm.
It's relatively flat. Could at one of the next board packets, either if there's a presentation or in the packet itself, just some details, some statistics in terms of the kinds of wetlands. 10% is this kind, 50% is this kind, so from a water depth standpoint. I'd be interested in that.
And sometimes half foot can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
I've seen.
I'm sure, yeah.
Any further questions? Wonderful. Looking at the manager comments, next month's meeting, already touched it on the cottage place, sounds like y'all are gonna do it for. Or I think that's really great. Next month is June, which would be great, and then, do I have a motion to adjourn?
One more quick.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah.
I don't remember what item, but since Pat's here, I just wanted to call out the natural resource folks. They've been doing a lot. Glad to see you've been doing some burns, and really glad to see that you've formed some partnerships with some of our local partners for helping, if it's burning or some of the other management practices. I think that's fantastic. Glad to see more, or like to see more of these.
Yeah, thank you.
Love it. Got a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good night, Lauren.
Good night, everyone.